Anybody here ever been a teacher before?
No.
I just have to teach just little things. Not necessarily in church, but not you, Mom. I know you're a teacher. But ever had to teach somebody something? I imagine teachers and preachers and a lot of people go through this. A lot of people I talk to. Sometimes, you know you're a preacher, you know you're a teacher, you have something coming up Sunday you have the preacher teach on. Sometimes you do not know what that is until you're walking up there. Sometimes you'll know what it is, you'll have a series planned or something. This is one of those times I knew, kind of right after Sean taught, what I was going to be teaching on. But I could not figure out which direction to take it. This way, that way, that way. Just the word kept appearing over and over in my mind. And it was Tuesday night, and I was laying there watching history videos on YouTube. I know it sounds super exciting. That's what I do at night. And so I was watching that stuff, and I just couldn't sleep. I turned the TV off, tried to go to bed. I slept maybe 1 hour that night of barely sleep. And then last night, after working all day and coming to church, I got home, and I was just dying to go to bed. And I was like, I don't even have my slideshow together. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know any of that. So I just toughed through it, stuck it out, stayed up, did the presentation. Today at work, there was a big rod. One was about 20 pounds, and one was about 5 or 6 pounds. Solid steel, we use them to mill parts. They go inside of a hole and mill inside of metal. Well, it broke in half. And I was just looking at it, wondering how something so solid and big could break in half. And as I was doing it, putting it together, it slipped, stuck right in my finger, stuck through it. 20-pound raw steel and puncture one. Bled like crazy everywhere. But it's kind of funny that I couldn't sleep and had to tough it out and stay through it. And then I punched myself and bled on my finger today, because tonight I will be teaching on sacrifice. So that was a very interesting series of events. So sacrifice. When you say sacrifice, it comes from the Greek word thesia, or thasia, and it just means to sacrifice, almost exactly like what you're thinking. An act of slaughtering an animal or person, or surrendering a possession as an offering to God or to a divine or supernatural figure. So, the Old Testament, sacrifices. Hebrews 11:4, I know it's New Testament, but it's referring to the Old Testament. It says, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. So, technically the first sacrifice of the Old Testament, the Cain and Abel sacrifice, where it was mentioned, what was talked about. And of course we all know how that ended. Cain killed Abel. So there was jealousy over even such a thing as a sacrifice, or jealousy over something you killed to God. So then we get to Abraham and Isaac, the sacrifice. So God told Abraham, kill your son. And he was like, well, that's a strange request, God, but you're God. I guess, I got to listen to you, so I will. So he took Isaac up there like, sorry, son. But right before he killed him, God stopped him. Now, this isn't necessarily biblical, but it's hard to think of that story and not think about Jesus. God sent his son to die. So what worthy seed was there on earth to send that son from in human form other than someone whose seed was willing to sacrifice his own seed for God? So that's what I think about when I think about Abraham and Isaac's story. So you get on into Kings, you get into the more grand ones. And the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifice before the Lord. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto the Lord 2 and 20,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. Can you picture how much that is in your head? Imagine the most full cow field you've ever seen. I bet it's not that many cows. And then to back that up, in 2 Chronicles, and King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep, so the king and all the people dedicated the house of God. If you were the sacrificer during that, that's like a full week's worth of sacrificing animals. Just one up. but the smell was something else there too. The work to get all of it there. But, when you think of these Old Testament times, you think like, out in the wilderness, small tribes and stuff. Not hoarding together something like that there wasn't. It was a great city, a great civilization. So then we get into Psalms. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. So in Revelations, this was kind of strange. I remember when Eric was teaching on it, on chapter 8, it says, another angel came and stood in an altar having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. So a censer is just something to pique the senses. It's one of those things that swing around with the smoke, smell good. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hands. So I was thinking like incense, and it compares prayers to incense. Kind of weird, like God's smelling the prayers and it smells good to him. But in the Old Testament, let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense. It mentions it a whole lot more than I'm just putting there, but for the sake of time, I can't put every time it talks about sacrifice in there. But I thought that was a good, cool little parallel. So what are the terms and conditions of a sacrifice, though? Can I just go around killing animals like Solomon did? I want great reward, so I just kill a lot of animals. If that was the case, and you can be forgiven for all of these things, you'd be like, hey, you want that guy dead? Cool. You got a couple cows? Yeah, sweet. We'll kill them. We'll kill the cows. We'll all be good with God, and let's keep going. It's not exactly how it would work. So Psalms, I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. So a sacrifice, we'll get into it in a second. And he said peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. Why didn't he say, hey guys, I'm sacrificing to God, come on? He said first, sanctify yourselves, then come sacrifice with me. So pay attention to that one, because we'll be referring to it a little bit later. So what are the other kind of sacrifices? The bad ones. So the sacrifice of the wicked is as an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. So sacrifice of the wicked. We aren't the only ones that sacrifice. They still do human sacrifices, so to speak. You want to talk about organ donations and the people who harvest organs from people they kidnap? That's kind of an evil sacrifice. And you see it in like weird rituals all throughout different places. It's still happening. So Proverbs 21:27, the sacrifice of the wicked is abomination. How much more when he bringeth it with a wicked mind? So let's say you weren't sanctified and you sacrifice something. It's not good. But if you do it and thinking that you're going to get evil reward for it, or you do it in spite of God, like I'm only doing this because you demand it and you're evil for demanding it, how much worse is it? In 2 Chronicles, for he sacrificed unto the gods of Damascus, which smote him. And he said, because the gods of the kings of Syria helped them, therefore will I sacrifice to them. So he's like, well, they just beat us, so I'm going to start sacrificing to their God, that they may help me. But they were the ruin of him and of all of Israel. The other gods they were sacrificing to. Hosea 13:2. And now they sin more and more, and have made them molten images of silver and idols according to their own understanding. All of it the work of the craftsmen. They say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. Don't know what their obsession is with cows, but they like them gold, and they worship them all throughout the Old Testament and everywhere else. And if ye offer the blind for sacrifice, so an animal that's blind or that's imperfect, is it not evil? You take something like, well, I'll just take my gimps, my little animals that aren't going to make it anywhere. I'll sacrifice them, so I'm not really losing nothing. God gets his animals killed. Everybody's happy. That's not how it works either. So, and if you offer the lame and the sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto thy governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts. So if you take somebody says, I really want a car, or you take somebody a present, and you just take them a car that doesn't even run with no tires. Well, all you did was bring them a big piece of steel to sit in their yard that ain't going to do anything. It's not really an honorable sacrifice. So, it's kind of what he's talking about there. So, are our sacrifices worthy? And are we worthy to sacrifice? So in Proverbs, it says this about sacrifice. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So sacrifice isn't the end-all be-all, get me into heaven because I've sacrificed. There's a lot of things that God likes more than just a sacrifice of that. Justice and judgment being one of them in Proverbs. Ecclesiastes 5:1. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools. For they consider not that they do evil. So it got to the point where people were just coming in to sacrifice. But he said, be more ready to hear. My word is going to help you more than you killing an animal of yours. And it always will. It always was true. It always will be. So one story about bad sacrifices. Just a quick 5 verses here. Therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth. And thy judgments are as the light that goeth forth. For I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. There have they dealt treacherously against me. Gilead is a city of them that work iniquity, and is polluted with blood. And as troops of robbers wait for a man, so the company of priests murder in the way by consent, for they commit lewdness. I have seen a horrible thing in the house of Israel. There is the whoredom of Ephraim. Israel is defiled. So they were coming in, bringing these priests, so-called things, sacrifices. They would also, leads to kind of human sacrifices here, but murder just means they were going in, just killing animals, maybe as punishment, demanding other people bring them all of their animals to be sacrificed, to be forgiven for God, and just completely made it of no effect, of no. And in 6 here it says, for I desired mercy and not sacrifice. So it came from a judgment. So then we go to the New Testament. So Matthew 9:13. But go ye and learn what that meaneth. I will have mercy and not sacrifice. This is Jesus talking. For I am not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And then he gets on them again just a few chapters later. But if ye had known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. So how many times do we go around and condemn people that aren't even guilty of anything just because of how you feel? God would rather you be merciful than to have sacrifice. God would rather you say, I know what you did was really messed up to me. I know, like, you caused me a lot of pain, but I will be merciful on you as opposed to wanting you to get me back or to give me something back. If you wreck my car, it's okay. You don't have to give me another car back for that. God would rather have your mercy, forgiveness, as opposed to sacrifice. Apply that to the same thing with God. If we do something bad against Him, we sin, we transgress, He would rather us get right than to give up things and sacrifice them as apologies to that. He would rather us have mercy, or He would rather have mercy on us than sacrifice. And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Here, Jesus healed a leper, and he's like, don't tell anybody, but he knew he was going to. And then he said, okay, go to the priest of the temple and demand they make sacrifice for this as Moses commanded, I think. And that was just a ritual with turtle doves. If you read the ritual, it's crazy. It's like split them in half, dip them in water once, do something else. So Mark 9:49, for everyone shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt. So you would rather be salted with fire, this is a good one here, than sacrifice just be salted with the salt. So in the New Testament sacrifice, what are we getting into here? They kept doing the weird stuff, probably more so in the New Testament. And they made a calf in those days, and offered sacrifice unto the idol, and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. So that was Acts 7:41. Later on in Acts, then the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands into the gate, and would have done sacrifice with the people. So they wanted to sacrifice to Jupiter. 1 Corinthians, what say I then, that the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? This is Paul talking about it. It's like, what's the big deal about it? What does that mean, you sacrifice it to idols? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to God. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. Believe it or not, people still do sacrifices to devils, to demons. They're called blood sacrifices because they're the most powerful, I suppose. There was a horror story. Somebody was renting out a house to some people. They were weird people, but they paid the bills on time, so they didn't check on it. Well, they heard some strange things. A lot of people were saying animals were going missing, their pets and everything. And finally one day they just stopped paying the bills, and they didn't pay them for a month or two, so they went to check it out, went in the house, and the whole house, so like the center of the floor, had been caved in, pushed in, broken, busted up in, and a big hole cut in the ceiling, and there was a big fire pit in that middle of the house. Just someone busted out the middle of the floor. And in that fire pit, they found bones of hundreds of animals, blood all over the walls and everything. They were using it as some kind of weird cult center and sacrificing animals and all kinds of different stuff to it. That person was like, I've never seen anything like it. It was the creepiest thing ever. Like, I didn't even fix the house. I just had it bulldozed down. So yeah, probably a good idea.
Our Papa did the same thing. They had people it felt like dog bones all in the house, in the oven, and he had us tear it down.
Yeah.
Rent it out before.
So it's still happening. Still some wild stuff out there. But let's get to the ultimate sacrifice. You all knew it was coming. I know you did. So, Hebrews again. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. This is why Jesus had to come. So the things in heaven, it was necessary before, but then to get better than that, they required better sacrifices. And what better sacrifice than the Son of God himself? That's why he had to come. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world, he hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Sacrifice of his Son. Here it says sacrifice of himself. God is Jesus, Jesus is God. Just kind of backs that up a little bit more. And as it is appointed unto men to die, men wants to die, but after this, the judgment. So we've talked a lot lately, just discussion between a lot of friends, like, what happens to dead people when they come back? What about the Old Testament people that died and never got to meet Jesus? What about the really good people who weren't really sinners, weren't bad, and they died before Jesus came? They kind of get a pass. I mean, God wasn't around. What if he was, they'd never even heard about it before? Well, here it says, is appointed unto men that wants to die, but after this, the judgment. So you better hope you were good enough to never hear about it before. I would never take my chances on that. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and to them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So the second coming is what we want more than the first one. And walk in love, as Christ also hath loved us, and hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling savor. There's that incense again. It smells good to him. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he saith, Sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. So there could be no other sacrifice but himself in his own body. He was the sacrifice. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. He was the ultimate sacrifice. He came in and did it all. I don't think a cow's good enough to God now that his own son's been sacrificed to him. Or probably wouldn't even attempt it, but try it. A living sacrifice. So Romans 12. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Every sacrifice, including Jesus himself, the sacrifice was death. They were alive. As soon as they died, they became sacrifices. All those cows, all those sheep, they were alive. In their death, they became sacrifices. We, us, after Jesus, are the only living sacrifices that I have found biblically in the Bible. So, there's a heavy burden that we have here to be living sacrifices. Not only is it on our deaths to mean something or be for a purpose like sacrifice, but our lives have to be something, have to mean something, the purpose. Yea, if I be offered up on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I joy and rejoice with you all. So he's offering himself a living sacrifice. If he offered it up just to serve you in faith, happy enough to rejoice. And Philip, keep going a little bit. But I have all and abound. I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. So even as a living sacrifice, we are still a sweet smell to God in our being living. So you don't have to die necessarily for that. Might be a little bit more punch to it if you die for God, but we represent ourselves a living sacrifice. So what then can we sacrifice if we must be living for that? So sacrifice before the definition, an act of slaughtering an animal or person. But that second part that I read a little bit faster so I could reiterate it later on. Surrendering a possession as an offering to God or to a divine supernatural figure. Surrendering a possession. So what do we have that we can sacrifice? Time, money, attention, sleep even. You know, there are things that God requires that you must give up things that you think you want or that you think you need to get all of this stuff for God. So, for an example, this is Eddie Hall. He pretty strong guy. He lifted 1,102 pounds here in a deadlift. That's a little over half a ton. But look at that picture on the bottom there with his nose bleeding and his eyes just that dead-eye look. It wasn't easy to get there. Like, you have to practice, you have to want it, you have to sacrifice time, money for food, sleep, pain of the sore muscles, you know, all the different things that have to go into it, health even a little bit later on. So what about farmers? It's hot a lot of times, there's sweat, it's expensive, the government is literally your sworn enemy in all of this, but they do it. It's not fun to do, but it's a sacrifice. So hunting even, you know, a lot of people that haven't been hunting before, sometimes it's raining. If you were hungry, imagine it, having to hunt. Snow, rain, miserable conditions. You go for a week and don't see even a bird or anything. There's a lot that goes into it, a sacrifice. Even in churches. After this corona, a lot of churches are suffering. A lot of people are backsliding. A lot of doors and places that were once full are now found empty. A lot of people who would have paid attention or would have been interested before are now a little bit further gone. It's going to be a lot harder to go in. We're going to have to reach a little bit deeper to get to those people. It can be discouraging, and it is discouraging to a lot of people sometimes. But success requires sacrifice. It's part of it. It's what you have to do to get there. So Eddie Hall, when he was deadlifting, he's now won the strongman a lot of times. He's got TV shows, never has to worry about money again, makes all kinds of friends, hangs out with governors and people. He's known as the big strong guy. Do you think he remembers all that pain and struggling when he's doing all these awesome things? Yes, but in a good way. It's called hard fun. His sacrifice of all that was worth it to him. The farmer who was out sweating and dying in the field and spending money fixing tools gets to eat at the end of it. Gets to feed his family, gets to feed his friends, gets to feed his community. The hunter who suffered in the snow, who suffered in the rain, gets to eat the meat, gets to kill, gets to bring it back to feed his family, his community, and everything. The pastor, the teachers, the preachers, the people who outreach, they get to find the people, even if it's just one person that you brought to God. That is your reward for it. There is a price you have to pay, the sacrifice, to get the rewards. You've heard it before. But imagine when you finally receive the reward, how good it felt because of how much you had to sacrifice and suffer to get that. So, Hebrews 13:15, by him therefore let us offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. So I've said all this tonight to come to one simple question and conclusion. Will you offer your sacrifice? I don't know what it is. God knows. Will you offer your sacrifice? That was faith.
That's a good one.
Any questions?